Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Troy Moling and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. Good to see you this week. Beginning our show today, there are three major fly species that are problematic in the summer and into the fall for pastured cattle. There's the horned fly, the face fly, and the stable fly. All three can hinder cattle performance, impact cattle health, and end up costing cattle producers money. I spoke with Extension's Dave Boxler about those issues and ways producers can manage flies in the fall.
Well, certainly with the horned fly, which is a blood-feeding fly, it on average can take about 32 blood meals per day. And so it's on the animal almost exclusively. And when we see horned fly numbers averaging more than 200 flies per animal, that is impacting the productivity of that animal. And that's when treatment should be applied by livestock producers. And unfortunately, this fly season, and I'm including this fall, we have seen horned fly numbers certainly surpassing on average over 2,000 per animal on untreated animals. So we've had a huge population of horned flies this season.
And Dave, you've written about diapause, which is a period of suspended development. Tell us how that relates to the horned fly and if it could be a reason why populations have been so large this year.
In Nebraska, when temperatures average less than 68 degrees over a 24-hour period, that's usually when diapause starts for the horned fly. And historically, we've seen that occur after Labor Day. Now, if you note that the weather this past September here in Nebraska has been extremely warm over most of the state. So we didn't really start to see diapause initiated till a little bit later in the month. And as diapause increases over time, it'll impact the adult horned fly populations because they will not be completing their life cycle.
Explain to us some ways an animal's performance is impacted by flies.
Well, it impacts weight gain, also grazing. They won't graze uniformly across a pasture. All three species can be problematic. We haven't talked a little bit about the impact of the face fly. And the face fly can mechanically vector the causative agent of pink eye. And this summer, and even into early fall, we saw a high incidence of pink eye throughout Nebraska on pastured cattle. So that's becoming a more increasingly large problem as we progress forward in the next couple of years, because we're seeing face fly numbers or populations in pastures that I've never seen before.
And Dave, what are some management options that have been shown to work?
Well, certainly when it comes to controlling flies during the fall, we're kind of limited in what we can do, but animal sprays for horned flies is very effective. They'll reduce fly numbers between 7 and 10 days. A lot of producers will like to pour their animals with a pour-on, and that can be effective up to 28 days depending upon the pour-on they use. Face fly, since it's a little more difficult to manage, and so you need to target the head area of the animal, and I think at this time of the year, certainly either a spray or a pour-on would be the product of choice for that particular fly. The stable fly, it's fairly difficult to control too because of its feeding habits. It only feeds about twice a day, and then it is off the animal. So we like to target a spray, an animal spray, either applied with a low pressure sprayer or with a mist blower sprayer. And I've been visiting with a livestock producer from Custer County here in the last few days. And this gentleman has utilized a mist blower sprayer for about 5 years and has found it to be most effective in controlling all 3 species of the flies that are bothering his animals. So he's a big proponent of a mist blower sprayer.
Dave also told me that historically drought conditions reduce fly populations, but this year it hasn't been the case. That could mean the different fly species are adapting to their environment. Definitely something worth watching. Time now to get a look at what's making news in the markets, and if you're not harvesting, then you might be in the minority. According to the latest USDA crop progress report, corn harvest is at 21%, almost double this time last year. For soybeans, even more, 55% of the crop is harvested, over 40 points up from last year, and more than double the 5-year average. I spoke with Darin Newsom of Darin Newsom Analysis this week to get his take on that and the recent movement in corn and soybeans.
We've had hot, dry weather for the most part, helping the combines to continue to roll. And I think that is what makes these moves in corn, in soybeans, that much more impressive. In the fact that we continue to see solid basis. Basis continues to firm. Despite, and then we look at soybeans with the type of move that we've seen recently, despite the fact everybody wants to sell them. Everybody's selling soybeans up front, and they should be selling them because there's no carry in the future spreads. So, I mean, we are in a full-blown weather market right now in the soybean market, mostly due to the hot, dry conditions in South America. But it's a weather market nonetheless, pushing the market higher, and it just continues to roll.
And you touched on basis numbers for a second, but let's dive a little deeper into that. For corn and soybeans, where do you see that basis going over the next month or so?
You know, the soybean market is interesting. I think it's like national average basis is like something like 58 cents under, 56 cents under, something like that. It's right around average for this time of year, a little bit better than average for this time of year, national average. The thing is, it's not breaking down. And what I'm hearing is that from the most part, yields have been better than expected. You know, as I talk to folks across the Midwest, so we've got a lot of early harvest. We've got yields better than expected. We've got cash sales being made, yet basis is holding together. So this continues to imply, to continue to shine a spotlight on, we've got good demand right now. We've got good demand right now. We're slowly building our supplies back up, but right now demand is outpacing the gain in supplies. We'll see how long this lasts. Usually a weather-driven short supply market tends to last only until the combines start running. Soybeans are going against that trend right now.
And Darin, one final question before we move on to the next topic. With everything that you've said, can you give us an idea of where farmers might want to target sales for corn and soybeans right now?
You know, in the soybean market, you just want to feed it a little bit at a time. So basically, as you're bringing crops in, because when you get in a weather market like this, it's impossible to pick a top. I know there's a lot of folks out there trying to pick tops. You can't do it. It's just, at some point, it's just going to hit that tipping point and it's going to come right back down. We just don't know where it is. In corn, it's a little more methodical. Corn likes round numbers. And so we crossed 380 earlier in the week. You know, now it's got its sights set on 390. Everyone's talking about 4. If I'm going to wait till 4, I'm going to have my order in just ahead of it. I'm going to have it in like at that 399, 399 and a half, something like that. Again, corn likes to hit round numbers, then back off for a while. So I think you can continue to use that method to sell your corn, to get that locked in. You say if you're hedging it, use the Dece, then look to roll out to the March. But on the soybeans, again, just look to sell those across the scale as much as possible, because that's what the market's telling you is the best play at this point.
Darin, let's look overseas now. South American weather has not been cooperating for farmers down there. So tell us, how have the markets been reacting to that dry weather, and what are some impacts we could maybe see back here at home?
The latest I've seen is that it's still quite dry in both Argentina and Brazil as they move through planting season and start to head into growing season. So this is not ideal, particularly since, over 6 to 9 months of this last marketing year, Brazil had record exports and they really pulled their supplies down, their available supplies down. So, the world's largest buyer, obviously China, was looking for Brazil, its main supplier now, to rebuild its stocks. If they can't do it, obviously that's going to turn more attention back to U.S. supplies, which is what we're seeing right now. So as long as it stays dry, as long as this La Nina stays in effect, it doesn't rain and there's more concern in South America, I think we're going to continue to see soybean future spreads inverted, telling us that there is a concern. And that's going to keep the market supported. It's going to be very hard to break a market. But once it starts raining, if it starts raining, you're going to see this whole thing come tumbling down like a house of cards. I think that would be the logical scenario. So, we have to pay very close attention to what's going on. China's paying very close attention to what's going on because they're still looking to do most of their buying in 2021 from Brazil.
Yeah, because it's important to note that the U.S. is more of a secondary market to China. South America is where they get their primary imports, right?
That is correct. We used to be the number one supplier, and then all of a sudden we were on par. We were even partners with Brazil as far as supplying China. But then, we got into a trade war and other problems, perked up here over the last few years. Now we're a secondary supplier, only with the attention only increasing on U.S. supplies when there's a weather problem. And it just so happens we are seeing the possibility of a weather problem down there. We don't know the production, South American production is going to be cut yet, but it's getting off to a dry start.
Next week, we'll be joined by Scott Brown from the University of Missouri. As always, if you have a question you'd like for me to ask him, email us or get in touch on social media, and I'll pass your question along. Next up, we all know harvest is an especially busy time of year, but as hectic as it can be, there might still be some moments of hurry up and wait. Kyle Broderick is coordinator of the UNL Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic. He says downtime in the field may feel like time wasted and suggests producers make the most of that time by using it to collect soil samples. Market Journal's Bill Dodd has more.
Waiting at the edge of a field in a grain truck can feel like an eternity sometimes. On the bright side, there is something you can do to fill that time productively. Collecting soil samples for analysis of Soybean Cyst Nematode, or SCN, can fill your downtime as well as give you a better insight into the ground you're sowing. Research has illustrated that this parasitic worm can cause over 40% yield loss, as well as up to 30% yield loss with no other visible symptoms, making this particular threat an invisible enemy of sorts.
It'd be so good if this nematode turned the leaves purple or blue or did something unique like some of our other diseases. Unfortunately, I've been in fields that have had 30% yield loss and the beans looked absolutely perfect. We've pulled up the roots and we were not able to find any cysts on the roots. Sometimes we can find cysts on the roots, other times we can't. So really collecting that soil sample is the only way to ensure ensure whether or not you have the nematode or not in the field. Additionally, farmers have already paid for this service. The Nebraska Soybean Board has been funding our SCN survey for the past 12 years. And this is funded by our soybean growers' checkoff dollars. So any soybean grower that is curious, they can go to their local extension office, and we have plenty of these bags available. And typically, if this was not a grant, this testing service would run between $25 and $30. But as it is, again, soybean growers have already paid into the checkoff dollars. This is just a way to get to get some of that checkoff money back.
This particular pathogen is well known to soybean producers. SCN has been found in every soybean producing region in the world, and that holds true for the United States and Nebraska as well. While it is recommended to collect samples from fields if soybean yields were lower than expected, when collecting samples, there are a few things you should take under consideration.
When we've tested county by county in Nebraska, we've found it in every county in the eastern half of Nebraska. But just because it's been found in that county, that does not necessarily mean that we find it in every field in that county. So soybean cyst nematode is typically found in areas of the field that tend to collect soil, whether this is via flooding, whether this is at field entryways, along a fenceway, or just other low areas in the field is where we tend to see this nematode show up the most, as anything that moves soil can move this nematode, whether that's tractor tires, whether it's water, etc. So one thing that can be done is you can go and target those specific areas of the field and just collect soil cores about 8 to 12 inches deep. Collect soil cores from those areas where there may be soil collecting. Otherwise, if the field is relatively flat or you're just kind of curious about a field-wide distribution, then we recommend just going in a zigzag pattern across the field, typically no more than about a 20 to 30 acre area. But in that 20 to 30 acre area, collect between 15 and 25 soil cores, again at that 8 to 12 inch, that 12-inch depth, to collect soil, and we can test for nematodes from that.
Once samples are collected and analyzed, you should have a pretty good idea of how you want to proceed when planting season rolls back around.
The main thing that we want to be looking for is this positive or is it negative? If it's negative, you can continue to use a soybean cyst nematode susceptible variety of soybeans. However, if it's positive for the nematode, then you'll probably want to start thinking about implementing some sort of resistance. Now, as we're looking at these high numbers, if we have SCN populations over 12,000 eggs per 100 cubic centimeters of soil, following corn or a non-host, corn or wheat, then we recommend at least one more year of having a non-host in that field. Now, if the field is just coming out of soybeans, then we recommend, and the populations are over 16,000, that's when we recommend not planting soybeans in that field next year, again going back to a non-host. One of the nice things about this nematode is, aside from a few of our winter annual weeds, soybeans are the only crop in Nebraska that this nematode can reproduce on. So we don't have to worry about populations increasing when we have corn or wheat in the rotation.
As the combines continue to go, row after row, if you happen to find yourself in a position where you're forced to hurry up and wait, you can make the most of your time and take two pigeons with one bean, so to speak, by collecting soil samples while waiting to complete your duties. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Thanks, Bill. If soybean cyst nematode is found in samples, Kyle recommends monitoring the population densities on a regular basis. Sampling every 2 to 3 years may be necessary to document any significant changes. If you'd like more information on SCN and soil sampling, we've provided a number of resources on the Market Journal website. Time now for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. And Al, always a lot going on in the forecast as harvest chugs along. What's the big story this week?
Well, Troy, overall, it's been a very dry week. In fact, very significantly dry. We've been seeing reports of grain that's being harvested, particularly on the soybean side, that's been dropping down to the 8% moisture level. Corn, some of the reports have been down as low as 12%. We're seeing a lot of it in the 14 to 15% range. So we expect a lot of harvest activity to go on, almost too dry for soybeans to some extent during the daytime. We just don't have a lot of opportunities for moisture. Unfortunately, this pattern has set in earnest. The biggest fear was as we went into this fall that we see these dry conditions with the La Nina building. It's exactly what is happening. There is one opportunity for precipitation during the 7-day forecast. Hopefully we'll get a little bit of moisture out of that, but it looks like the models have been backing off somewhat on the extent of that moisture as compared to what we were seeing pretty much from last weekend all the way through the middle of the week. So let's get to the forecast and see what we might expect as we go through this next 7-day period. As you can see from today's upper air pattern, we have a trough over the Pacific Northwest, a small ridging pattern over the southern plains, and the remnants of Hurricane Delta that now has a surface low in northeastern portions of Louisiana, is starting to get its tropical storm characteristics downgraded to depression status, heavy precipitation band with it. No precipitation expected for us here in the Central Plains. As we get into tomorrow, we start to see that trough from the Pacific Northwest starting to make inlets into the Central Plains. See a low pressure trying to develop in northeastern portions of Kansas. That might provide enough lift in the afternoon to generate some thunderstorms across eastern Nebraska, but most of the precipitation will remain over the Rockies. That precipitation shield is expected to move through the plains region over the overnight hours and into Monday morning, quickly moving toward our east as high pressure tries to build in. That's going to bring a little cooler conditions on Monday. We'll be back down into more normal conditions back into the 60s. You see that precipitation band over the northern United States. And then on Tuesday, we see that trough lift just a little bit toward the north. We might see a rebound in temperature about 6 degrees. We'll be looking at the upper 60s to low 70s. Low pressure in northeastern Colorado doesn't have any moisture to work with, so we're going to be basically looking at just a little bit of cloud cover to deal with. More importantly, that trough tries to regenerate itself and dig down a little bit farther south, bringing that cool area into northern Nebraska, but we will still remain fairly warm in southern Nebraska, probably looking at mid-70s. Low pressure in the Texas Panhandle, once again, may have a little bit of moisture surge northward, but because this trough is lifting so fast, I don't think we're going to get a lot of moisture into our region. It's going to stay to the north of us. And by Thursday, we're going to see some cooler air move in, so that rebound into the 70s will probably drop us back down into the lower 70s, upper 60s as high pressure settles in. We see most of the precipitation over the Great Lakes in the form of scattered snow shower activity. And on Friday, that trough starts to lift out, and we start to see a ridge building back in. See low pressure set up along the Rocky region. However, it doesn't look like there's going to be any moisture to work with. So most of that moisture will remain to our north, and it looks like we're going to see a fairly decent weekend. The 8 to 14-day forecast indicates that cool air, as it comes over the northern Rockies, will dive down in once again to reinforce that trough in the east, meaning cooler conditions to our east, warmer conditions to our west. And in terms of precipitation, there just is no moisture to work with, so we're looking at a very dry forecast. So Troy, overall, the best opportunities for precipitation come Sunday night into Monday, but overall it looks like another dry stretch. So we should see a lot of harvest activity once again ramping up as we go through next week.
Thanks, Al. For our final story today, cover crops are a popular subject among Nebraska Extension researchers. Katja Koehler-Cole, a UNL research assistant professor, conducted a study to determine soil nitrate levels in corn plots with and without cover crops.
Hi, my name is Katja Koehler-Cole, and I'm with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Agronomy and Horticulture Department. And today we're out here at the Eastern Nebraska Research and Extension Center to look at some of our cover crop research. One of the main reasons we grow cover crops is to prevent the leaching of soil nutrients, especially nitrate. So today I'm going to show you a device that we're using to measure the amount of nitrate that is in the soil water. So we're here in one of our cover crop plots, and this is actually continuous corn. So we're growing a cover crop of winter cereal rye that we're planting in the fall, and then we're terminating it in late April or early May, right before we plant the corn. You can actually see a little bit of the cover crop residue on the ground. So one of the reasons we grow cover crops is to use them to take up excess nitrate that's in the soil. Especially in the spring, our soils are warming up. We have a lot of soil microbes that are breaking down the soil organic matter, so there's a lot of potential for nitrogen to be lost. There are no plants growing yet, so that nitrogen is just gonna go down with the rain and basically leach below the root zone and be lost. That has a lot of potential issues. It can contaminate the groundwater. Here in Nebraska, we have several areas where groundwater has too high of nitrate levels for human consumption. And it's of course also a loss of nutrients, which is not a good situation for our growers. So this device here is called a lysimeter, and it's basically a 6-foot long tube. We installed it at a depth of 4 feet. So basically it's just below the root zone of the corn. It has a ceramic cup that's porous at the bottom, and it has those two suction lines. One is for air, one is for water. So with this line here, we have created a vacuum with a vacuum pump. Create a vacuum on this one, and then this is our water line. So now we can draw the water that has collected in the ceramic cup. So we installed this at the end or in about the middle of June, and since then we have been coming out every week or so to collect the water that is in the tube. So what we're doing is we're connecting our syringe to this line, then we're opening this clamp, and then we can open the other clamp to let air in. And now we're going to draw, and hopefully water will come up. It's been extremely dry. This is one of the driest Augusts on record. So I'm not sure we're going to get a lot of water. There it is. There is our water. Okay. So as you can see, I was able to collect about 20 or so milliliters of water, which is enough for us. We're going to fill it into a little container, and then this water we're sending to the laboratory, and it will be tested for nitrate. Now we can clamp down on these ones again, create a vacuum with our suction pump, our vacuum pump here, and that's it. And we'll come back out next week again and collect this water again. This is the second year we have done those trials. Last year we found that having a cover crop, even though by the time we're sampling the cover crop has been dead, but we still found that soil nitrate or nitrate in the soil water was reduced by about 50% initially. What we also found that, or most of the nitrate that is in the soil water is there in the beginning of the season until about the end of July. Once August comes around, the soil water that we collect in the lice emitters where we had a cover crop and in those where we did not have a cover crop basically have the same amount of nitrate, and it's very low, almost not detectable. So that tells us that corn takes up most of its nitrogen during its vegetative growth and up until about early reproductive growth. That's when it has the highest demand for nitrogen. So what we have learned with our research on winter cover crops and corn and soybean systems is that they can really help prevent the leaching of nitrate, especially early in the season until about the middle or the end of July.
Katja is also conducting a similar study in soybeans. We'll have more on that next week. That's going to do it for this week's show. If you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app or follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. And don't forget, you can get the latest updates on the coronavirus outbreak at covid19.unl.edu. Hope to see you right back here next time. I'm Troy Moling. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.